Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, gents.
Back again.
New Year.
Thank you
Yes.
for having me.
Dan's with us again this time.
I just realised there's a camera on me as well. I was like this, thinking, yes, there's no camera on me.
Nah. But you, like, it's there, but
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
for
yeah.
whenever. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, firstly, thanks for coming back again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be back.
Good New Year and that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm super excited about 2020, actually.
Yeah.
The last decade has been tough. It's been a grind. I mean, 2019 in particular.
Yeah.
There's so many things that kind of caused, turbulence and destruction for a lot of people. The elections, Brexit still hanging over us. That it meant a lot of people were just very hesitant when it came to making decisions.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of that, we felt it. It was pretty sluggish all year round. But I think we've turned a new year, we've turned a new decade, and there's definitely positive momentum going into 2020. So I'm super excited about it.
So naturally, that made your job very difficult.
100%, and I think you could feel it, in quite a lot of sectors. Money makes the world go round, and every time there's an issue with the economy or politics, it always has an impact on finance. And when there's a problem in the financial sector, you feel that people aren't transacting as they normally would. So all of a sudden, people who were gearing up, entrepreneurs gearing up to sell their business, had papers all lined up. All of a sudden, the buyers were pulling out. People were trying to sell properties, weren't selling. People couldn't really continue with their normal livelihoods because everything they had planned for was falling apart. And so it makes things difficult to transact. So yeah, we felt that for sure.
As you were talking about that though, just quickly, because I know that like the property value was going down a lot.
Yeah.
Which was obviously not good for people who wanted to sell.
So yeah.
But then like wouldn't of last year been, or maybe even going into this year, wouldn't it technically be the best time to buy?
Absolutely. Look, I think, people always trying to game the system in terms of when's the right time for me to buy a property. I think it's all very individual. It's all based on what your scenario is. I think, it's been a buyer's market for the last 2-3 years. Since Brexit was announced, it's definitely been a buyer's market. It's definitely been a market for international investors, people who've seen that the pound is cheap and therefore they're coming into the UK and just buying up everything they find for a good price. So if you're selling your property, it's definitely a good market for the buyers because they're coming in and they're saying, actually, I'm not going to offer you $500,000 for that. I'm going to offer you 400. But because the market is a bit stagnant, you're thinking, if I don't take the 400, am I going to get 500 in a year or 2 or 3 years? So if you need that money, if you need that capital out of your asset, you're then saying, you know what, I'll sell it for 400. So if you're a buyer, you can definitely go in. Most of the transactions I've been involved in over the last 12 months, I would say nobody's really going for asking price.
Yeah.
Everyone's going in and bargaining and getting a cheaper deal. As long as you're able to complete quickly, people are getting good deals out there.
Do you feel like it's turned the corner though, or do you feel like the bottom? We're not at the bottom yet.
I mean, are we at the bottom? Probably not. Yeah. And for sure, it depends what part of the country you're in, because London, we know that's a hot market.
Yeah.
Up and down the country is not always the same effect. I still think we don't know what the full effects of Brexit will be once it happens. Okay, and so I think between now and then, there's still going to be some hesitation, but I feel like at least with the elections out of the way, people are now certain that we're moving in the right direction. So I think things are picking up. But there's definitely still deals out there to be had for properties for sure, 100%.
So the bottom's looking real low though.
The bottom's looking low, but I think it depends on demand, right? If you're looking at properties, there are those that are sort of, accessible to the mass market. If you're talking about affordable housing, for example, properties that are worth sort of £500,000-600,000 or below, there's a much bigger population of people who can afford those houses. And so you're not going to find crazy deals there, because if you're not going to buy it, somebody else will. It's once you start looking at properties from $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million really and upwards, that's when the market starts reducing in terms of the amount of people who can afford those properties. And so at that point, then you can't be as picky if you're the seller when somebody comes and offers you 1.8 rather than 2 million, because you're thinking, do you know what, actually I may not get the 2 million I want. And not just that, a lot of it has to do with sentiment as well. So valuers. So if you're going to buy a property, you need a valuation for the bank to give you the money. Valuers are going in, and because of sentiment, they're feeling, we don't think the property is worth 2 million anymore. We think it's worth 1.6. So before you've even exchanged money, someone's come and told you your house is not worth what you thought it was. Yeah. So that's also having a major impact. And that has
because then people will then be like, I ain't selling that then, or they'll try and find someone else who will value it.
Correct. But you know what? That's technically people losing money, overnight. Because you're sitting on this asset you've owned for maybe 5-10 years. Somebody comes along and says, Chucky, that property is not worth 2 million. I think it's worth 1.6. that's it. I mean, you either accept it or you don't. So if you don't accept it, you don't sell your property, you keep sitting on it. But if you need that money out of that property, you have no choice. You're going to have to sort of, adhere to what they're saying in terms of what they feel the market is doing at the moment.
Fair. Just for those who don't know, the Urban Financier is with us, yeah? For people who haven't listened to the last 2 episodes that you were on, can you just give people a brief in what your job role is and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a private banker and I look after entrepreneurs. So my clients are in about 30 or so sectors, from cars to fashion to food and beverage to recruitment to property. And my job is to help them effectively grow their wealth, help them with lending, investments, and protecting their legacy ultimately.
When a new year starts, especially like a new year like this year, 2020, I know that like there's loads of people that are looking at doing like many different things when it comes to like health, but also with wealth and money and stuff like that. Yeah. When the new year turns, like what type of conversations are you usually having with your clients at this time of the year? Because I know that it's not really like the beginning of a financial year, but it's the beginning of a year where people are wanting to do things. So what type of conversations are you usually having?
I think the beauty of that is that my conversations happen way before the end of the year. I think people start planning for the new year from the summer onwards, really. So what you tend to find is, in terms of how transactions work, you normally have the summer period where it's really quiet, everyone goes on holiday. When they return from their summer break is when they start planning for the year ahead. So what houses or properties or assets are they buying the following year? What are they going to invest in? What assets are going to sell? What opportunities are they going to look for? So the conversations start well in advance before then. But I think it's an opportunity for everyone to almost press the reset button, to look at the situation and think, right, okay, how best should I utilize the resources that I've got? Am I paying too much on this debt? Am I getting the best return for this money? Do I want to acquire a new asset? Do I want to sell a business? Do I want to start up a new venture? There's all these type of questions. Ultimately, everyone's in this to try and make, a legacy or create an empire for their families, right? And that's one thing I find in terms of when you look at the difference between class, that the upper class, or those who are in the sort of the high tier of society, they don't leave anything to chance, okay? They're investing heavily in themselves and their families. When you look at the lower tiers, there could be people amongst us who've got money. We're not investing in ourselves and our families as much as they are. And we're kind of almost leaving it to the government or to other people as their responsibility. Whereas my clients are all educating their children in the best schools, or they'll have if you like, additional support for their children if they need to. They're making sure they're going to the best things and the best places, yes, because they've got the money to do so. But I feel like when we come into money, we're not thinking the same. We're thinking, well, what can I buy for me? Whereas they think very much.
When you say we, do you mean people who don't come initially from money?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. People who don't come from money. So when you look at the lower tiers of society, we might acquire, wealth, but we're not thinking about investing that into us and the immediate people around us, so that we start building or at least uplifting those around us, and we kind of leave it up to other people to do it. So you'll find people who've got money living in big mansions and their families are still living in areas where they grew up in, and they're still accessing all the general welfare things that you would expect anybody else to. Whereas actually, if they used their wealth to invest into their own, then what you're doing is you're uplifting everyone's standards, right?
Guilty. I tell you why I'm guilty, yeah? Because, like going through a time where we've spoken about before about like not having money and all of that type of stuff, yeah? Or like finding yourself in a situation where you're broke and you're low, or you've had money and then you go broke. When you start making money again, there's sometimes becomes this thing of, something's around the corner, so let me just treat myself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that ever happened to you,
for
but
me,
like
I was actually quite responsible. My thing's CCJs, isn't it? But apart from when it comes to money, I'm quite responsible when it comes to buying what I think are assets rather than too many liabilities.
Okay.
So like, trust me, I fight with when I'm buying liabilities, I fight with myself. It don't matter if it's £100. That I'm fighting with myself. I'm just like, are you just throwing this in the ocean? Yeah,
because I saw you in the Dior's recently. Still,
that's a liability. But do you know what? It's a liability. However, as long as you don't mash up your Dior's, I'll tell you what I did. Yeah, to buy those Dior's, I actually got rid of Louis that I hadn't worn for like 2 years. Now those Louis were $450 at the time of purchase.
Okay.
When I sold them,
they were more.
And I sold them on eBay, yeah? Imagine someone from Universal bought it, like one of the top guys at Universal. So I see the address and I have to send it to Universal in King's Cross. But they bought it for $430.
Oh, okay.
Loss of £20 over 3 years.
That's not too bad.
That's it. And the same with Dior's. If I got my Dior's at retail, yeah, they're quite rare, the colorway I got.
Yeah.
You go on StockX, that's one bag too. So in reality, as long as I don't play football in them, the money remains. So you
still was quite smart. I was saying it more in the sense of, to begin with, because of not being used to having it and feeling like something was going to be around the corner where something was going to be taken from me.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, you know what, I need to just buy this and that or whatever. But I think that was because I didn't necessarily understand what a liability was really.
Yeah.
I was buying it more, as you said, for me, but then over a period of time.
I mean, look, I think when you're looking at the principles of money, we have to understand that there's a part of us that we have to enjoy the money we're making too. Yeah. If you're working all these hours in the day and all you're doing is kind of, things that you don't enjoy, then what is the point? Ultimately, you have to be able to enjoy an element of it. But I do think part of society have this right and other parts of society don't. If you look at certain cultures, for example, okay, once you're in your 20s and you've got a salary and you start making a living for yourself, they group together, they put the resources together, they buy properties together, and you might be living together for the next 5-10 years. But after that, you've now built enough that you can go off in your separate ways, all owning assets. Right. Whereas some other parts of society, the moment you start earning a salary, you're buying a rental car, you're going on expensive holidays, you're buying expensive clothes, right? So you're already depleting those resources that other people around society are using to build a foundation. So then we're always behind because, in 5-10 years time, yes, you're still maybe earning well, but compared to somebody else who's earning the same as you, now are sitting on 4, 5, 6 different property assets or whatever it might be, whereas you're just still kind of cutting a check and living, almost pay to paycheck. That's the difference. That mentality that we want everything now. Right? Yeah. We have this thing where we can't delay gratification. It's, if I've got a pay rise, I have to go and buy a new chain, I have to go take a holiday, I have to go buy this, I have to go buy that. It's all very immediate. Whereas I think for this year and this new decade, I want us to think more long term. And think that it's okay to kind of forego some of that excitement now, because in the future you're setting yourself up for a much easier life. Right? We can't undo the mistakes of the past, and that's fine. So whatever we did in the last decade, 2019, we're probably going to be paying for it this year and years to come. I'm talking about spending, because that's one element that, there's 4 elements of finance, really, of money. When we look at making money, we look at spending money, we look at growing money, right? And then we look at effectively protecting our money. A lot of us know how to spend our money, right? We don't need to be taught how to do that. That's very easy. We make money just by the very simple means of getting a job. But equally, a lot of us don't know how to really make money, right? A lot of us just know how to get our pay slip and that's it. But you are seeing an increasing level of people now trying to find passive income or create other sources of income, which is good. And I think the internet has enabled that. But when it comes to things like saving money or growing and protecting your money, again, that's something that we're not all invested in, right? You see a lot of posts and a lot of things on the internet about, what do I invest in? I'm at uni, or I've got 10 grand, I've got 20,000. What do I put my money into? And I kind of think people aren't really sitting down to understand the reason why they want to do it. They're just saying, I want to invest because I've heard people talk about investments and it sounds sexy and it sounds something that, if I'm intelligent, I should do. But they're not actually looking behind the scenes to think, why are you actually investing that money? I've heard stories of people tell me, I've lost £20,000 because I was saving up for a wedding and some guy said, I could put this on Forex for you, and they lost all my money. Right. And that's where the wedding fund.
I lost 40 bags to flipping crypto.
I know.
Not that long ago, man.
Right. I remember. I remember when we was here. He was talking.
It went up to 75, and I was just like this. And then it just went.
Yeah, literally. There's an episode. You might even have the visual to it. You was there on your laptop.
I had like 75 bags, and it was just gone.
But you know what? and that's not uncommon.
Yeah,
that's not uncommon because had you actually taken a step back and thought, right, before I invest this money, in spite of how great the returns appear, before I invest this money, let me ask myself the question: what is the purpose of me doing this? 2, what is my time horizon? 3, what is my risk appetite? right? Because once you start asking yourself those questions,
time horizon.
Yeah.
So I had mine. So I kind of wasn't planning to touch anything, and I was going to be very passive with it until 2022.
So time horizon in the sense of,
as in you have to have it.
How long have you got effectively to put that money to work? Because if you turn around to me, Chucky, and say I've got £20,000, but I'm getting married next year, I would say stay away from stock markets, because in that time of 12 months, there's no guarantee that you're going to see half of even what you're investing now, because naturally it will fluctuate. Yeah. Right. So your time horizon and your risk appetite will often dictate what type of investment you go into.
Okay.
So I think for a lot of people at home watching or listening who say, I just want to invest my money, really ask yourself those questions first before you do anything. Right. Because that will ultimately lead you to where you should be putting your money.
Yeah, that is a super common question. Like where should I invest my money? But
correct. Well, it must be one of the most Googled things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But you're right. I think that people ask that question without actually trying to understand why they want to. I guess the normal or the stock thing would just be, I just want to invest my money just to just make money. But people don't know really, or I don't think people understand that sometimes that this investing money stuff sometimes takes a long time for you to see a return.
And that's why the time horizon is important, because if you're saying I've got this money now and I need it in a year's time, then can you really afford for it to fluctuate? Probably not. You know, because the moment it fluctuates, that money isn't guaranteed to come back. And so, you know, you look at savings, then you think, right, okay, what are some of the safer options that I can go for rather than sticking my money in the stock market or giving it to a forex trader?
Yeah.
So, you know, have you guys come across notice accounts?
No. What is that?
So a notice account is basically a type of a deposit account whereby you agree for a term to commit your money for either 3 months, 6 months, 9 months.
I've heard about this.
And therefore you earn a higher level of interest than you would if you just left it in an instant access account.
So you got to put a certain amount of money in though, right?
Correct. So, I mean, the notice account will be determined by the length. So it could be 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And you say, right, I want to go for a 6-month notice. So you can't touch that money in that 6 months. But after that 6 months, it's yours.
Can you put more money into it?
No, sometimes you can't put more money into it. Sometimes you can. It really depends on what the account is. But effectively, you've got that time frame where before you access your money, you need to give them 3 months notice or 6 months notice or 9 months notice. And that's why it's called a notice account. So it's the time in which you have to give them a notification before you can access that money back.
Are these big banks, as in big banks that provide?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Accounts, and just in general, you see, like, when it's all said and done, everything is a bit of it's a risk. So what is there like a big fluctuation of risk between people who take 3 months and 9 months?
Well, I think, you know, that is still a deposit account, the notice account. So it's not going to be put into the stock market or it isn't going to be sort of put into some risky investment. That is still technically a deposit account. Okay, so if you're not looking to take a high level of risk and you're actually thinking, I want to earn a bit of interest, but I don't want to kind of put this anywhere crazy, a notice account is just the safe way of you doing it. It means that you forego access to your money for a couple of months or whatever the term is, but at least you know your money is still guaranteed at the end with a bit of interest.
What sort of interest rates are you likely to see?
I was just about to ask that.
So you're not going to look
subtitle that.
You're not going to look at, you know, anything astronomical like, you know, sort of double digits for sure. It's still going to be sort of relatively low because interest rates in general are low at the moment. But the benefit behind that is you're going to earn a bit more than you would if you just left it in an instant access account. And also the benefit of it is for somebody who can't trust themselves, somebody without the discipline to not touch their money, that's perfect because you physically can't touch the money for 3, 6, 9 or 12 months or whatever the term is. So also it's a bit of discipline and it helps you not to sort of spend the money if you've got a goal in mind.
Financial goals, I'm sure that like that's a conversation that you must get from maybe from some of your clients, but just like in personal conversations and stuff like that. Honestly, I'd probably say, like, for me personally, the last few years has been a time where I've looked more into like having financial goals and stuff like that. Before I never used to do that. If I'm being honest with you, I was been winging it for a very long time. I'm telling you, I've been winging it for a very long time. But now I'm asking more questions and looking at certain things or whatever. In terms of like, firstly, do you have a financial? Do you think about that?
Yeah, mine are already set. I kind of have got a pretty clear picture of what I need and how I'm going to do it for the next few years. Okay.
So I have a financial goal as well. I feel like I have a understanding of how I'm going to do it. One of the things that I was doing, like especially last year, was by the way, I swear I got a bank account with every bank. Yeah, where I've got like these different things that I'm doing, but to me it's organized mess. But I know exactly what's going on. Okay. So for example, when I get paid, my money goes into a certain bank account. Yeah. And then I take a percentage out for my taxes and I put that somewhere else. Yeah. And then what I was doing as well was see like the figure that I had left. So let's say, for example, if I got paid $1,000, then I would take, let's just say 20%. I'd put that in somewhere. Yeah. Then I would take 20% off the remaining figure. Whereas now I stopped that and I'm like, I've tried to like say, all right, cool. I get paid $1,000. I take 20% of that figure that I've got there, which is basically I take 40% away. Right. So I use the other 20% and put that somewhere else, as opposed to taking 20% of the remaining figure.
Right.
That way that helps me to save more money going into the future. But I guess that then ties more into the life budgeting and stuff like that, because honestly, I probably spend way too much money on casual things like eating out and food and all of these other things or whatnot, especially over Christmas and that. Spent a whole bunch of money doing that.
Do you know what's weird, yeah? My dad always told me, like, buying trainers, clothes, all of this stuff that you don't necessarily need, cool, feel bad about that. But he was like, if it's food, unless you're going to the Shard every day, when you're buying food and we're not buying crazy stuff. We're going Roosters instead of going Sainsbury's and buying the chicken.
Well, I go to the yard. You know what I'm saying? I go to the yard shop sometimes, and I don't mind doing that, because when I go to the yard shop, it doesn't feel too bad, because I feel like I'm giving money back to my community anyway when I'm doing things like that. So, but
I think it adds up. And so look, I hear a lot of these things again about, and sometimes for me, I think bad information is equal to or worse than no information at all. So for a lot of these people who are not financially literate, when they're watching a lot of these videos and some of these moguls in the US talking about here's how you should divide your money every month and don't buy this or don't buy that, I think sometimes that can be very dangerous, because somebody who's not trained and able to actually dissect what's what, they might just follow these instructions and actually end up in a worse place than they need to be. There's a lot of things out there that says you have to divide your monthly paycheck by X, Y, Z, spend this much, save this much, do whatever this much with your bills. But if your lifestyle doesn't dictate that, then you shouldn't be guided by that. If your expenditure is only 10% of what you earn, don't make it 30 because that's what a guy on YouTube said. Do you know what I mean? Stick to what your lifestyle dictates. Equally, a lot of people ask, oh, well, how do I, how much money should I save if I'm trying to save for a house but I'm paying rent? Well, your rent is going to dictate how much you can save. Right, because if you earn £1,000 a month and your rent is 600, well, I can't tell you to save 800, can I? Because it physically it won't work. So I think you definitely have to look at where you're coming from. But when it comes to saving, the easiest way to save money is to spend less than you earn, or earn less than you spend. It's as simple as that. Right, it's as simple as that. Once you start, I think the practice you've got, Chucky, is good. Having different accounts to start putting things in different places, because it's not that easily accessible. What I would say is, when we think we're just swiping, especially now with contactless, it all adds up. It all adds up. I mean, you'll be surprised every time you just ping it across and you look at your statement, you think, wow, it adds up.
Well, sorry to stop you there. I actually still, with a couple of my bank accounts or whatever, I got contactless, but I don't really use it. With my main bank account that I use every day, it doesn't have contactless on it. And I was just thinking, just today, I was thinking, I need to just get contactless. Do you know why? Because I feel like, now I feel like the dickhead that's standing there the extra 30 seconds. And it's not even long. It's actually not even long. But you know when they hand you the card machine? And everyone just taps. Now I'm having to take the card machine, slap it in myself, and I get a bit annoyed that they just assume that it's contactless. Do you get what I'm saying? But yeah, I guess that contactless though does make it so much easier to just...
It does, but I'll tell you what a lot of people I know do is that they have a separate account for their expenditure. So as part of their budget, they know exactly how much they're committing themselves to spend that month. And they'll transfer that money from when they're paid to that account. So once you spent it, you spent it. So at least whilst you're tapping away, you're conscious that actually, I've only moved £200 into this account. And so whatever you're spending, you're conscious that it's not, a sort of a bottomless pit, that it will stop at some point. Right. And that's how you start to discipline yourself when you're budgeting. So rather than just having this blanket approach of, I'm going to save 20%, spend 30% and do this or whatever percent, look at what your circumstances actually command. Because by doing that, you can say, I don't need to spend 30% of my salary if I can live on 15%. Do you know what I mean?
What does because even with financial goals and stuff like that, like what is the actual conversation around that? Because naturally is very subjective to the amount of money that you make, your class, all of these different types of things. But like for me, when I think of like financial goal and stuff, I don't necessarily just think about money and stuff that I'm saving. For me personally, it's just about like and I guess because I'm self-employed as well, so like there's like my thing is cool. How am I going to get extra jobs to make extra money? That's more my mindset of the financial plan, as opposed to thinking, cool, I already just make this amount a year or whatnot, or I don't make that much, I'm just doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to try and make a financial plan out of what I've already got. Mine is more just based off trying to make more than I already had from last year. But I guess that's more of a self-employed mindset.
That's a life stage you're going through. If you remember our last conversation, I talked about the 3 stages effectively, and you're at that wealth accumulation stage where you've spent a decade or so building your craft, and now you're looking for ways to actually increase the revenues that you actually generate. Right, and that's what you're doing. So yes, that may not necessarily be a strict financial goal. That's more sort of a life goal of you trying to better yourself. But it does tie into that ultimately, because what are we all trying to achieve here? Let's be honest. When it comes to money, we all want to make money. We all want to live well. We want to look after our families and friends, right? We just want to have a good life. In order to do that, you have to be disciplined. And that's when you have to start paying attention to, right, what are my sources of income? How much am I spending? How much do I have in a rainy day account? And when I retire, which we all will at some point, right? Have I got enough money in my bank account for me to retire? Especially as a self-employed individual, you have to contribute to national insurance yourself, right? Because you're not PAYE. So when you retire, unless you've had at least 10 years of contribution towards towards national insurance, then you're not entitled to normal state pension. And do you know how much state pension pays you if it's just the standard basic state pension? £168 a week. Okay, so imagine going from your prime now, when you're earning thousands a month, to earning under £700 a month when you're retired. Right? Your quality of living will deteriorate enormously. So those are things you start thinking about, and you're never ever too young to start planning for a pension.
So that's a good one actually, because I've been meaning to, like, I don't know, look deeper into this, because I don't have a pension set up or anything like that. I know that there's private pensions.
Correct.
That you pay into. And how good are they, and what kind of...
They're as good as you make it. So it's a self-invested pension. It's a SIP, they call it sometimes. But if you look at a private pension, it's effectively you putting money into a pot yourself.
And does it get matched by anyone? That's the thing. Like most PAYE jobs,
that's if you're employed. If you're self-employed, you haven't got that benefit. It's for people who are PAYE. So for those who are listening who are PAYE, it's criminal not to be putting away money in your pension because it's being matched, and therefore the pot you're going to have to retire on will be much bigger just by you simply taking a fraction of your gross salary, right? And before you even get taxed on it. So actually, it doesn't hurt as much as if you're actually putting money away once you've paid tax on it as well, right? So it's criminal not to, but we do have to start thinking about retirement, because one thing I look at is when we talk about generational wealth, I know a lot of families who've now got generational wealth all because somebody took out a life insurance policy many decades ago, right? And when they passed away, that policy paid out. That policy paid out a couple £100,000, and that £100,000 have now turned into millions, right? And it was probably costing them a couple £100 or that a year for that policy, right? That's free money, effectively. Now, of course, nobody wants to have that morbid conversation of, we'll talk about death and that's what I need this for. But that's how some generational wealth has started.
100%.
Do you know what the thing is, though? I mean, I can't speak for other generations here, but it does feel a little bit like people don't think about life after they've passed away.
No.
It's more just, I'm gonna do me, it's lit, and that's just that.
I think that, so like, no one doesn't... When you have kids, that does change.
Okay.
It definitely changes. It doesn't mean that you care about him, and him, but you definitely start to think about what really matters.
How they live, once you've got...
So I've been meaning to pull the trigger on life insurance as well. But
I mean,
as it stands, honestly, I have no pension, no life insurance.
Right,
if I die.
There's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse not to have any of that stuff, especially if you've got dependents, right? Yeah. Even if you don't have dependents, I remember I set up my life insurance, I don't know, years ago, and I was paying £6 a month. Yeah. I spend £6 a month on worse things in life, right?
Of course.
But if something happens to me, I know someone's going to get a very nice check, right? That doesn't cost me anything. So even if I'm being selfish and living for me right now, I still know that if something happens to me, someone else is going to get a very nice check that will help them at least build something from it. So there's no excuse. No pension, no life insurance. That's almost criminal. It's kind of thinking.
So for me, for in terms of pensions, you said there's SIP accounts.
Yeah. So self-invested pension.
So you basically just everything. Is it more than just a bank account? Because I could argue that I have a SIP account if it's just money I'm putting away for a rainy day.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but ultimately, the way the tax treatments are different when you have a pension as well. Okay. I think for all self-employed people, my biggest advice to you would be to go and find a local financial planner, somebody you can just kind of run things by and say, here's what I've got. What's the best way for me to either start a pension or start this or start that? Yeah. So would I be right in assuming that you haven't subscribed to your ISAs as well then?
I did on the last. Oh no! No! That was Help to Buy. That's an ISA. Help to Buy.
So the Help to Buy ISA. So that's interesting because I think again it's this thing around people following a theme and something that's hot at the time. Help to Buy ISAs have been around for a while. No one's ever paid attention to it until they heard it was ending. Now all of a sudden everyone's subscribing to Help to Buy ISA. Do they even know what it's for? Right? All of a sudden everybody's subscribing to a Help to Buy ISA.
Yeah.
So after I came on this show last, I remember putting up a post on my Instagram to ask people what their biggest financial concerns were. And just to break some of that down, because this is relevant. And a lot of it was people saying, my biggest concern is not being able to afford a property. Other people were concerned about not being able to clear the debt. Other people were concerned about savings, investing. And the last one was looking after their family. Mm-hmm. When it comes to buying a property, if we look at this on a very basic level, for those, at the bottom of the scale and at the top of the scale, there are so many entry points to owning property now, which is, easier than it's ever been, right? Even if you live in a council flat or a council house, you now have a right to buy, where the council will give you a discount on the property you're living in if you've lived there for a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even have to be, you could bring in family members who've lived with you for the last 12 months, let's say, to be part of this scheme as well. So you can use all your income together to buy the house. You can get, if you're in London, up to around £110,000 off the price of your house. Mm-hmm. Mm. All you then have to do is go get a mortgage for the difference. Okay, that property is now yours. All right, done. Mm-hmm. On top of that, you've got now first time buyers, where again in London you can get big discounts on some properties, and again all you have to then do is go and find the mortgage. So with the right to buy, that one's the easiest way to enter the market. If you're in a council situation, you're dependent on welfare, they're still giving you the access to go and own your own property, right? Mm. Now think of this. Once you've got that discount, you've taken out your mortgage, I think after 5 years or so, there's no longer any obligations if you were to sell the property to pay any of that money back, right? So even if you were to sell that property in 5-10 years, now all of a sudden that £100,000 or whatever you got from the council is technically money in your pocket. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where else are you going to go to find £100,000 deposit on a house?
Exactly. Yeah, of course.
Right? Yeah. So that's a no-brainer. That's an easy win. And again, I think there are certain parts of society where you might all grow up in a house, okay? You, your brothers, your sisters, your parents, in a council flat or a house. Once you all start working and you take advantage of this opportunity, yes, you might be on a mortgage for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Cool. But after that, you guys now own a house.
Of course. Yeah.
And even if you were to go and remortgage that property and take some of the equity out, you can now go and help somebody else. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Why are we not taking advantage of that? Yeah. I think again that might not be something a lot of people are aware they can do. But then you've got shared ownership, you've got right to buy, help to buy, which you can now again get a discount towards the property you're buying, which again is another route to get onto the property ladder. So I think a lot of people who are sitting there thinking, I haven't got savings of 100,000 or 80,000 or 50,000 to buy a property, therefore I'm never going to be able to afford a property. But there are options out there. If you do have the means, however, to save your own money up and buy a property, that's always the easiest way, right? Because there are far less restrictions in terms of what you can buy and what you can't do with that property.
So let me ask you this though. Say as a self-employed person, you have technically money or you've saved enough for deposits and all of that type of stuff. Yeah. Notoriously, it's harder as a self-employed person to get property when you're self-employed, because obviously you have to show a certain amount of years and stuff like that. Is there somewhat like a polite way around that?
What, in terms of acquiring a mortgage to buy a house when you're self-employed? Yeah. There are lenders out there for sure. There are lenders out there.
It just means that your percentage of interest is going to be super higher.
Not always. I mean, it depends how long you've been in business for, and it depends what you can demonstrate. I think there are a lot of the high street banks who don't recognize, the self-employed individual who has a lot of, let's say, retained earnings in the business, but don't pay themselves a great amount on salary or PAYE because you don't need to, right? If you run a business and you're making net profits of £600,000 a year, but it costs you £50,000 to live, why are you paying yourself £600,000 a year just to pay tax on it? Doesn't make any sense, right? There are some lenders out there, more bespoke. So maybe go through brokers, mortgage brokers, who you can say, look, I'm self-employed. Here's my business. These are my accounts. What deals can you get me? There are definitely deals out there for sure. Right. It's just that if you just punch it into a normal online mortgage calculator, nothing's happening.
I just want to go to students quickly as well. Is there a way that students can study and not be broke?
How you study and not be broke is finding income.
Or is that part of the process?
It's not necessarily. It doesn't have to be part of the process. There are a lot of people that I grew up with who, whilst we were at school, were making money because they had side hustles. They started businesses. They started trading. They started entities. So, there's definitely. I think, especially now in the age of social media, right? People can make money whilst they're sleeping. From their social media pages or whatever else they do. And so, I get it. There's a struggle whilst you're a student that, yes, you won't be as rich as people who are not studying because you can't commit as much of your time to making an income as those who are not studying. Yeah. Right. That's a fact. And so, yes, you will feel a bit of pain. And we've all been there. And I remember my very first student overdraft from Barclays, I think it was, and thinking that's all I had to live on until, my next paycheck came from somewhere. There is a phase of life where you go through where that is the case. Right? Yeah. But I think now there's an opportunity for a student. The biggest thing for you as a student is to minimize your outgoings. Yeah. As simple as that.
Isn't there a lot of unis actually, it's I don't want to say forbidden, but they want you to not work. So I'm sure if you go to Cambridge or Oxford, you're not allowed to work.
Well, they would rather you obviously.
No, I think that's one of the. I don't think you're allowed.
Right. If that is the case, though, obviously I'm not saying it is or it isn't, whatever. But if that is the case,
sure then
in those type of universities, usually you have people that come from a certain class where financially.
Not necessarily. There's people who went to St.
Now,
Charles.
of course, what I'm saying is usually though. Yeah. Like percentage wise, like what's his name? George the Poet. He didn't come from that, but he went to Oxford or Cambridge. One of the two. He didn't come.
As an ultimate, there's always you get examples. The grades and you can go.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but I think
there is limitations if you're at Oxford. But the thing is, I've got friends who went to Oxford and they started their own businesses and they started obviously making their own income that way, and that was perfectly fine. But there are some limitations if you're in Oxford.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think it's all about enterprise and how you go about it. If you're at uni studying and you set up your own business, I think they probably encourage that. Yeah, it's kind of showing that entrepreneurial flair whilst you're studying. And a lot of these, people who go in to start all these mega billion-dollar companies, a lot of them met at university, created the ideas at university, and just as soon as they finished, they just got serious about it. So, yes, it's going to be tough whilst you're studying, but I think that's when you have to be disciplined with what you're spending your money on.
Of course, shout out to the student gang. Someone sent me that message, so I thought I'd ask you. What would you say is the best thing to do with saved money? Yeah. So, but I'm talking about not necessarily like large money, but it could be like from 5k to 15k and stuff like that, in a day where, like as you mentioned before, banks ain't giving like high interest, but people have some money in the bank. Like what are some of the best things that people could do? Like buy gold, watches.
I mean,
what would you advise?
You can buy collectible assets. I think sometimes people are trying to move mountains with figures that you really can't move mountains with. I think somebody has 15,000 and think, gosh, I should be able to do something amazing with £15,000. I promise you, go on Google and type in, how do I turn 15,000 to 100,000? And it's not an easy answer, right? It's not, if there was the easy formula, everybody would do it, right? But there are options in terms of, what can you do? Yes, it depends again. It goes back to the questions around what is the purpose of you doing that? What is your risk appetite and what's your time horizon? Those we should really be starting the conversation there in order to then drive towards where we want to go. Things like buying, collectible assets, watches, for example. The last time I was here, I spoke about watches, how well some of them are doing. But even that, I've seen a bit of a dip in that recently in terms of some of the resale values that they've started to bottom out a bit. So people who are buying these watches everywhere now are finding that actually the resale values for some of them aren't holding out as well as they thought they would.
Yeah, I wonder if that's got a lot to do with like when you say some of them, you're talking about certain types of watches.
There's certain types of watches,
like a certain maybe standard of like Rolex watches and stuff like that, because so much people are buying them now.
Yeah,
that it's lowering the stock value.
Yeah, but there's low stock on it. It's the sport watches in reality, but it's the like, I don't know. It's more technical, and it's more technical in different parts of the world. That's
correct. It's all about the demand. You know, there are some watches, Patek, for example, and Nautilus, for example. You know, if you're lucky enough to find one of those at retail price, which is what the creators have intended.
What is the retail on the Nautilus nowadays?
It's probably about 36, 38.
See, I know someone that got it for that.
Yeah,
it's now
36, 38. And now you're talking 60, 70 easy.
His one's 90.
Right, okay. So depending on what type it is. Yeah. So if you're going to invest in a watch, for example, and you think I've got £15,000, well, you know what your bracket is. You can't enter it at that level because how you get your hands on a retail Nautilus, for example, is almost impossible. But like I said, some of the Rolexes have started to also bottom out as well. So be careful of that, because one that I particularly noticed, when you go into some of these second-hand websites who are selling them, and you might notice that, they bought this Sky Dweller for 11,100. They're now selling it for 15,000. Bear in mind that that's the online retailer's price. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to sell it for, because they're factoring in their margin, their cost, their tax, everything else. So they might buy that watch they're selling for 16,000 only for 11,000 from you. So actually, you've not made any money because you bought it for 11,000, and they've bought it from you for 11,000, and they're selling it for 15. So be careful not to get too distracted by the figures they're selling it for, because that's not what they're going to buy it from you, unless you want to hang out and sell things yourself personally. But then again, it comes with the timing and risk and everything else with these people who are buying it. But what do you do with 5, 10, 15,000 pounds? I mean, you really have to look at what you have access to. I think access is super important. You can put it on the stock market if you've got the time horizon and you've got the tolerance to see it fluctuate. You can look at bonds. So government bonds, corporate bonds, that's effectively another type of investment. But instead of it being, at risk onto the markets necessarily, that's either the government or a company wanting to raise money by saying, you give us this amount for between 1 to 5 years, and we promise to give you back this level of interest. So historically, bonds used to do really well because that was kind of a guaranteed way that your money was, not at risk too much, but you would get a decent level of return back. Other than that, gold and things like that, again, do the research. There's so many things you can buy. There are handbags which can be good investments ultimately, right?
There are watches.
Correct. But again, to get one of those at retail is again very, very difficult. And that's why I said, I think, you can't move mountains with figures that, it just is impossible to do with. And sometimes the best thing to do is keep that money safe, keep it at least beating the rate of inflation. So at least have an interest paying account. Why people don't subscribe to ISAs, again, is criminal. That's tax-free money, right? And if you put that in there, £20,000, you tuck that away. If you've got a partner, 20,000 for them too. That's £40,000 that you're putting away every year tax-free. Yeah. Right. And that's things like that, and that will pay you a decent level of return on that as well.
That is just a big thing, though. I know that a lot of people go through and that, and like when you talk about or have conversations about finance or whatever, especially when you're talking to young people. Like, I know a lot of people go through mad debt and CCJs and stuff like that. I know you spoke before about having a couple of them and that.
Parking tickets, man.
Yeah, the parking tickets is just, Have you been all right with them recently, though?
I'll be honest with you, man. I had a little, 3-week period last year.
Getting a bit mad.
When again, like I said, just...
Yeah, it's nuts.
But don't worry, I figured out what I'm going to have to do a long time ago. My deposit needs to be hefty.
Yeah,
hefty. So that's what it is, and it is what it is.
Well, I know some people worry about having CCJs and then not being able to move financially or whatnot, but that's not necessarily the case.
So no, if you have a CCJ, typically that will stay on your credit file for about 6 years. Between 3 and 6, some lenders would be more lenient on it, and they will accept it with some rationale and reasoning to say, okay, it happened, you've paid it off, everything's okay.
Is there a different severity of CCJ? So I know CCJ is just one term, but one can be a parking ticket, one can be
a default on a house.
Default on a can it?
Do you know what it is? Once you've got a CCJ, you have a CCJ. The terminology, it just depends on the lender and how they view it. Once they sit in front of you and talk to you and say, actually,
that was £60, not 600,000.
Right. But immediately, a lot of these applications now are done online. And once they're looking at these things, they're not asking any questions. They've seen a CCJ.
And if
it's been the last 3 years, that's going to impact you negatively, so that will make it harder for you.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. If you have a CCJ, look, these things happen. You still can find, debt. You still can find, mortgages and get, properties. It just means that for the first 3 years at least, it might be a bit trickier.
Yeah.
But after 6 years, it comes with a file.
What is it like the toughest thing with your job, dealing with your job at this time of the year now?
At this time of year, I mean, I think it's not so much this time of year. I think it's just in general, in terms of, I talked earlier on about sentiment in the marketplace and what people are doing. A lot of people, last year or the year before were very hesitant when it came to investing for growth in their own businesses, for example. A lot of people who had things lined up to be sold weren't selling. And so cash flow is king. Cash is king. For anybody who's self-employed will understand that cash is absolute king. What people have to be careful of sometimes is not trying to be too clever that leave themselves short of cash flow. Because what you find is some people might tuck all their eggs away in such clever places, but haven't got money to live on day to day, right? So a lot of the time you see all these posts around the internet about so-and-so is worth 300 million or so-and-so is worth 20 million, but they can't write you a check for 100,000 because all that wealth they've got is tucked away in places that they can't put their hands on immediately. And they've got no cash flow. And when you've got issues with liquidity, that can cause you serious problems from a credit perspective. Because the moment you start missing payments on small things like utility bills or a phone bill, whatever, all those millions you're worth, it doesn't come to play. Because for banks, as far as they're concerned, you start missing payments. They don't care that you live in a £10 million mansion or that you've got a business that turns over $500 million. They're now considering you as at risk because you're not running your accounts in a certain way. So people have to be conscious of that liquidity is king. So yes, whilst people are always saying, I want to invest my money, understand what you actually want to invest it for, but also understand that don't leave yourself dry because at any moment you can get hit with a bill. At any moment you can get hit with something that you weren't expecting. How do you cover those expenses?
That's for
I got killed the other day.
What, on the same thing?
No, on imagine, so where I was across the road before, I paid rent to the building.
Yeah.
And then there was an additional part of that was used as was sent to electricity. Obviously, studios use a lot of electricity, yeah. So I thought, I've moved across the road. It's the same company. It's just the sister building. It's the same thing. But literally like 3 weeks ago, EDF knock on the door. They'll be like, yeah, we're just going to check your meter. Check the meter. It hasn't been paid for the whole year.
Oh, shit.
And I was on no contract. So it means that they charge
they make
you like
up the
double.
numbers
They make the number.
They make up the number.
3,800. One. That's it. They're just like, yeah. It has to be done.
That's the thing as well. See
but for me, I'm furious at the building for not letting me. I know it's probably in some kind of contract somewhere.
Yeah, they probably.
But as in, you see what I'm saying? Like,
but from a personal finance perspective, something like that can throw somebody completely off.
Yes, exactly.
All of a sudden, you've been presented a bill of £3,000. And you've got no liquidity. Yeah. And that's when people start scrapping around, going to payday loans just to kind of release funds. And so you have to be careful that, when you're looking at your financial picture, there needs to be diversification. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. A lot of people who are in property find this the trickiest because property is not something that you can turn liquid easily.
No.
Right? You can't walk into the house and just cut a brick off and say, I'm turning that into cash. It doesn't work that way. So some people can be overexposed in certain asset classes and that causes them problems with liquidity.
Yeah. It's the saving aspect as well. I know that it's really difficult to talk about because naturally in almost what you're saying as well is that it's so subjective to what that person has, how much they make and what their outgoings are.
Correct.
Because so much people always ask people, especially when it comes to you and stuff like that, on saving tips and stuff. And I think I could only ever talk about how I save money, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. Because that wouldn't have my saving tip today wouldn't have worked for me. 8 years ago. It just wouldn't, because I didn't have money like that.
Yeah.
So I would have been leaving myself short. And I think that is a problem that some people are going to find themselves in, where trying to do too much,
correct,
and then having nothing.
And that's what I said at the start about the fact that there's all these sort of mechanisms that are out there. People saying you have to split your income into this amount or this portion. Well, no, look at your personal circumstance and actually establish what is it that I need to spend? What is it that I can therefore save? I mean, there are the simple practices, like I said, I've talked about a few of those, notice accounts and ISAs, and making sure that you're utilizing all these things that are available to you so that you're putting the money somewhere. But in terms of how you come to those figures, that is very individual. And that's where budgeting helps, because if you've got a budget, I think when you messaged me, Chucky, I said that I've just finished my personal cash flow for 2020. And I generally had, I've got my spreadsheet ready for the year. Now I'm just waiting to see what goes up and down.
So so explain, because for people who don't understand that, explain when you was talking about your personal cash flow.
So put it this way, I've effectively drawn out my whole spending pattern for the year before the year started.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting when you messaged me that and said that, because I've never done that.
Yeah.
Really. Well, obviously, when I do my tax accounts and stuff like that, I've got like certain things that I've drawn out. But how detailed is yours?
It's detailed. So I mean, I've got it listed out for the whole 12 months. And to be fair, from last year, I already kind of fed through to this year, but I've started it again just for this year. But it's kind of all the sources of income, all the outgoings, assets owned, cost of servicing those assets, because that's what people forget a lot of the time.
How detailed is your outgoings though? Are you are you going down to a suite?
I'm going down to lunch. I'm going down to travel. I'm going down to everything. I'm going down to, I have an amount. And again, automation is the key.
Yeah.
Don't do this manually. Don't say to yourself, oh, I'm going to move this money every time I get paid. I have standing orders that are going around like the Matrix, right? Yeah. So there's no accident and there's no mistake that when I look at the spreadsheet, things should be where I expect them to be, right? Because I've kind of planned it out. So the only things I'm going to change is actually, did I spend as much as I thought I was going to spend this month? If not, okay, I've got some surplus. And even now, I've planned in my surplus. So for me, it's like a game. I'm watching that spreadsheet thinking, oh man, I didn't spend as much. Or Christmas comes and think, do you know what? I've overspent there, but actually, I can make that back up in these months, and I have a quiet month.
Does it become like a game to you though? It's like a game that you want to keep that spending thing as low as.
I promise you, it's a game, because I'm looking at it full 12 months ahead, thinking, wow, that's going to be a good month. Well, that month isn't going to be so great. So everything that I'm doing, I'm planning accordingly to what that spreadsheet is saying in the back of my mind.
But then also, isn't a number isn't that subject to because maybe you might hit a big one financially. Yeah. At a certain point, so you're like, okay, maybe naturally, elements of my financial, like what I'm spending money on, I can raise that a little bit.
Correct. So absolutely. I mean, what I've done is conservative in terms of some of the columns. Income, for example, will undoubtedly change throughout the year, but I've made it conservative. So it's almost a worst case scenario that if everything stays as it is, this is how I'll finish the year.
Pessimistic or optimistic.
And so when that month arrives, and actually it's been a very good month, then I'll adjust it accordingly. But at least in my mentality is that because I've planned to spend a certain amount, I'm not sitting there trying to buy things that, I shouldn't be buying just because I was expecting this to come, because my spreadsheet doesn't say so. My spreadsheet says this is how much I've allocated to spend. And so if I have a great month and I have a lot more income than I was expecting, great. That's the surplus. I just go and put it into something else.
Word. Final thoughts?
Yeah, this is a lot to take in.
Do you know what the good thing about this is? I can watch it back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And I can, this one here, you understand what I'm saying? And other people can do that. But that's why I just think, it's always good to have these type of conversations and this is your third time now.
Yeah.
And I thought it was important to have it right at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And also, maybe another 2 more times in the year, just to kind of just get just some tips from you and your train of thought and your perspective on things. And I think it's very important as well, anything that is said here, it's important to do your own research too.
100%.
Yeah. So there are things that are being said, but do your own research. So
I can't stress that enough. I mean, in terms of final thoughts for me, it's definitely that, be curious. If you have somebody on the internet that's saying to you, Chucky or Dan, I can promise to make you richer if you give me your money, be suspicious, right? Because that person needs you more than you need them.
100%.
Right? But I hear these stories too often where people are falling for it and just say, oh yeah, sure. Well, they had a nice office and therefore I gave them the money and never saw it again. For you to lose £20,000, you have to earn, if you're a normal tax-paying employee, you have to earn £26,000 gross in order to get that £20,000 back.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a lot. When you're losing money out your pocket, that's net money you're losing.
Yeah.
And so before anybody comes and takes your money, be curious, ask questions. And if you're not sure, seek opinions before you part of your money. because we work hard for it.
100%. I think, do you know what, yeah? I just think about this now. There's like a certain age gap or age sort of, I don't know what the right word is, yeah, of people that are optimistic financially in terms of like what people will do with their money. Yeah. And then there's like another bit in between where people are pessimistic. So to explain it better, when you are maybe like, let's say 18 and younger, so I'm just giving just a rough age, when you're 18 and younger, you're optimistic when somebody comes to you and says, right, if you give me X, Y, and Z, I can do X, Y, and Z with it. And so you give it to them.
You give them your square. You give them your card.
Everything. You give them everything. But also, say 45 and over, they're exactly the same too, because, well, maybe a bit older, because remember, like to them, even though the internet is not particularly new, like there's still elements of that is quite new to them, especially when they're getting pop-ups of people that say, hey, give me, you know, your savings and I'll do X, Y, and Z with it. Because the amount of times I've had like an auntie or a granny or someone who come, like you hear about stories of people that have taken money from them. But within that though, you have people that are a bit more pessimistic where it's just like, I don't really... Like, I don't know. What do you mean? Why are you coming to me? What have you done? Like, what have you done with your money before you come to me?
Look, there's always a reason why somebody's aggressively coming to you to ask for your money. Right? That's to me says they need you more than you need 100%. Them, and often that's the case. But last thing for me, I would say is also the fact that people shouldn't really be comparing themselves just by what they see aesthetically from other people, because I think when it comes to when it comes to wealth, when it comes to finance, I think everyone can put on a great show without the true substance beneath it. So imagine this, somebody here is making this other person feel inadequate because they just know how to put on a good show. Meanwhile, this person here is probably more financially solid than they are, right? But just because they know how to put on a good show, this person's sitting at home thinking that they're not worth anything. And that's just the worst thing you can do in terms of self-confidence. So take things with a pinch of salt. It's not always as it appears to be.
100%. And do you know what, that when you said that made me think of one of my best mates as well. He's not a flashy guy like that, but when I tell you, you wouldn't think it, but if you ask him what he's doing, he's just doing so much, but he's not that. You put him in amongst of the people that put on a good show and you don't see him. But when it comes to talking about what's really happening, he's in a great place. And to be honest with you, that really inspires me. Having friends like that. Bro, thanks. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it. Your Instagram, Urban Financier. Anyone got any questions, they can hit you up or whatnot. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.